Brielle's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the mahogany conference table, her knuckles turning pale against her dark skin. The laughter of Rocco Martelli's associates still echoed in her ears, their cruel mimicry of her Caribbean accent burning like acid in her chest. She had endured worse in her life, survived things that would have broken most people, but this particular humiliation cut deeper than she expected. "Clean it again," one of them had sneered. "Maybe this time we'll understand what you're saying." She kept her eyes down, reaching for the cleaning spray, when a voice sliced through the room like a blade, deep, cold, absolutely lethal. "Repeat what you just said." The temperature in the penthouse conference room dropped 10 degrees. Brielle looked up to find Rocco Martelli standing in the doorway, his 6'3" frame filling the space with a presence that made grown men flinch. His steel-grey eyes were fixed on his associate with the kind of look that preceded violence. But then those eyes shifted to her, really looked at her, and for the first time in 3 months of cleaning his penthouse, Brielle felt truly seen. "You," he said, his Italian accent wrapping around the single word. "Where are you from?" It was just one question, but somehow Brielle knew her answer would change everything. If you want to discover how this story began and what happened after this moment, subscribe to the channel and leave in the comments where you're watching from. Each view helps bring more stories like this one. Now, let's go back to where it all started. 3 months earlier, Brielle Washington stood outside the Martelli Tower in downtown Chicago, staring up at the gleaming skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. Her uniform, a simple grey dress and white apron, felt too tight across her shoulders, and her feet already ached in the cheap shoes she'd bought at a discount store. "You're late," the building manager snapped as Brielle rushed through the service entrance. "Mr. Martelli's penthouse needs to be spotless before he arrives at 6. Brielle bit back a response. She'd taken 3 buses to get here from the south side, juggling this job with her morning shift at the hospital laundry and her evening classes at community college. Late was relative when you were trying to survive in a city that wanted to chew you up and spit you out. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending to another world. When the doors opened, Brielle stepped into a space that belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. White marble floors reflected the afternoon sun. Art that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime hung on the walls. "Don't touch anything except what needs cleaning," the manager warned. "Mr. Martelli is very particular." Brielle had heard about Rocco Martelli. Everyone in Chicago had. The youngest don in the city's Italian Mafia family. He'd taken control at 32 after his father's death and consolidated power with ruthless efficiency. The newspapers called him a legitimate businessman. The streets knew better. She started in the kitchen, scrubbing counters that already gleamed, her mind wandering to her daughter. Amara was safe with Mrs. Chen downstairs, the elderly neighbor who watched her for whatever Brielle could afford to pay. At 4 years old, Amara deserved better than hand-me-down clothes and a mother who worked herself to exhaustion. "I'm doing this for you, baby," Brielle whispered, attacking a stubborn spot on the granite. "Doing what?" The voice came from behind her, smooth and dangerous. Brielle spun around, nearly dropping her cleaning supplies. Rocco Martelli stood in the kitchen doorway, hands in the pockets of tailored black trousers, white shirt open at the collar revealing the edge of an intricate tattoo. He was devastatingly handsome, in a way that felt almost cruel. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from stone, dark hair swept back from a face that radiated controlled power. But it was his eyes that stopped Brielle's breath, grey like winter storms, assessing her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Mr. Martelli," she stammered, her accent thickening with nerves. "I didn't hear you come in. I can finish later if—" "You're new." It wasn't a question. He moved closer, and Brielle caught the scent of expensive cologne and something darker, more dangerous. "What's your name?" "Brielle, sir, Brielle Washington." "You don't need to call me Sir, Brielle." The way he said her name, with that slight Italian inflection, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "How long have you been cleaning?" 3 months at this company. Before that I worked—" She stopped herself. He didn't need her life story, but Rocco tilted his head, genuinely curious. "Before that? Different job, sir. I mean, Mr. Martelli. She fumbled with the cleaning spray. Whatever I could find. He studied her for a long moment, those storm-grey eyes seeing more than she wanted to reveal. You're educated. It wasn't a question, but Brielle found herself answering anyway. Some college. I'm working on finishing my degree. In what? Literature, languages. She laughed, a bitter sound. Not very practical, I know. Languages, Rocco repeated, something shifting in his expression. Which ones? Spanish, French, some Italian. The words were out before Brielle could stop them. She'd learned languages like other people collected scars, each one a reminder of a life she'd left behind. Rocco's eyebrows rose slightly, the first real expression she'd seen on his carefully controlled face. But before he could respond, his phone rang. The temperature in the room changed instantly as he answered in rapid Italian, his voice hard and cold. Brielle turned back to her cleaning, trying to make herself invisible. She caught fragments of the conversation, something about shipments and territories, and a name that made Rocco's jaw tighten, Dmitry Volkov. When he ended the call, he stood there for a moment, tension radiating from his body. Then, abruptly, he turned and left the kitchen without another word. Brielle released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking as she resumed cleaning, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. The way he'd looked at her, the questions he'd asked, it felt like the beginning of something she couldn't name. Over the next weeks, Brielle settled into a routine. She cleaned the penthouse 3 times a week, usually when Rocco wasn't there. But sometimes she'd arrive to find him in his office, door closed, voice low and menacing as he conducted business she didn't want to know about. She learned to move through his space like a ghost, invisible and silent. She learned which rooms were off limits. She learned that the faint metallic smell that sometimes clung to his clothes wasn't cologne. She also learned that despite his reputation, Rocco Martelli never raised his voice at her, never made her feel less than human. In a life full of men who'd done both, it was dangerously disarming. One evening, as Brielle was finishing up in the library, she heard voices in the main room. She should have stayed hidden, but something in the cruel laughter made her pause at the door. 4 men sat around Rocco's conference table, his associates, the ones who came for weekly meetings. They were passing around crystal glasses of whiskey, their faces flushed with alcohol and arrogance. "Another girl from the south side to clean up after us," one of them said, his words slurring slightly. "At least this one's pretty, even if we can't understand a word she says." Brielle's stomach clenched. She started to back away, but her elbow caught a shelf, sending a book tumbling to the floor. The conversation stopped. 4 pairs of eyes turned to her. "Well, well," the same man said, standing up. "Speak of the devil. Come here, sweetheart. Say something for us." Brielle's heart hammered. "I was just leaving." "Just leaving," he mimicked, exaggerating her Caribbean accent. "Hear that, boys? Just leaving. Where are you from, honey? Jamaica, Haiti?" "Trinidad," Brielle said quietly, hating how small her voice sounded. "Trinidad," another man laughed. "That explains it. I thought maybe she had marbles in her mouth." They all laughed. The sound wrapped around Brielle like chains, dragging her back to every moment in her life when she'd been made to feel inferior. When her accent had been used as a weapon against her. When the color of her skin had been a reason to dismiss her humanity. She set down her cleaning supplies with trembling hands. "I'll come back tomorrow to finish." "Clean it again," the first man sneered, pointing at the already spotless table. "Maybe this time we'll understand what you're saying." That's when Rocco walked in. The change in atmosphere was immediate and terrifying. Rocco Martelli stood in the doorway, and Brielle watched as 4 grown men, violent criminals who terrorized the city, went pale. "Repeat what you just said." His voice was deadly quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The man who'd been mocking Brielle tried to laugh it off. "Boss, I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked you to repeat what you said." Rocco's eyes were flat, cold. "Now." Silence filled the room like poison gas. The man's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. We didn't mean anything by it, Mr. Martelli. Just having some fun." "Fun," Rocco stepped further into the room, and Brielle noticed every man tensed. "You think mocking someone for their accent is fun, Tony?" "No, sir, You disrespected her in my home." Each word was precise, controlled. "You made her feel unsafe in a place where she comes to work. Do you understand what that means?" Tony's face had gone from red to white. "Mr. Martelli, I'm sorry, I didn't think—" "No, you didn't think." Rocco's gaze swept over the other men. "Any of you, get out! All of you!" They scrambled to their feet, practically tripping over each other to reach the door, but Rocco's voice stopped Tony at the threshold. "Your take from the warehouse shipments is cut by 30% for the next 6 months. Consider it tuition for learning basic human decency." When they were gone, the silence in the penthouse felt heavy. Brielle stood frozen, her cleaning supplies still clutched in her hands, unsure what to do or say. Rocco turned those storm-grey eyes on her, really looked at her, and for the first time in 3 months of cleaning his penthouse, Brielle felt truly seen. "You," he said, his Italian accent wrapping around the single word. "Where are you from?" "Trinidad," Brielle answered, her voice stronger now. "Port of Spain." "How old were you when you came to America?" 17. He nodded slowly, processing this information. "You've lived here for, what, 8 years?" 9. 9 years, and you're still working cleaning jobs." It wasn't judgment in his voice, but something else. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. "Why?" Brielle lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. "Because I have a daughter to feed. Because my degree doesn't pay bills. Because the world doesn't care about my potential, it only cares about what I can do right now." Something flickered in Rocco's expression. Surprise, perhaps, that she'd answered so honestly. He crossed to the bar, poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "Sit down, Brielle. I should really finish." "Sit. Down." It wasn't harsh, but it was clearly not a request. Brielle perched on the edge of the white leather sofa, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her cleaning uniform. Rocco sat across from her, elbows on his knees, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "How old is your daughter?" 4. Her father? Not in the picture. Brielle took a sip of water. "It's just me and Amara." "Amara," Rocco repeated. "Beautiful name." "It means grace in Italian." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You know that because of your language studies." "I know that because I wanted my daughter to have a name that meant something, that reminded her she's worthy of grace, even when the world tries to tell her otherwise." Rocco leaned back, and Brielle could have sworn she saw something like respect in those cold grey eyes. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? A voiceless cleaning woman who'd accept being humiliated?" "Most people don't talk back to me." "I'm not most people, Mr. Martelli." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "No, you're not." He stood abruptly, moving to his desk and pulling out a business card. "I have a proposition for you." Brielle's stomach clenched with wariness. She'd heard about propositions from powerful men before. They never ended well for women like her. But Rocco just held out the card. "I need someone to handle correspondence for my international business operations. Someone fluent in multiple languages who can communicate with contacts in Europe, South America, the Caribbean. Someone who can be discreet." "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a way out of scrubbing floors." His eyes locked onto hers. "The pay is 5 times what you're making now. You work from here 9 to 5, no cleaning involved. You'd have access to a car, benefits, and enough flexibility to be there for your daughter." It sounded too good to be true, and in Brielle's experience, things that sounded too good to be true usually were. "What's the catch?" "The catch is that you'd be working for me, for my organization." He didn't insult her intelligence by pretending to be something he wasn't. "You'd see things, hear things, know things that could put you in danger if you ever betrayed my trust. And if I say no, then you continue cleaning my penthouse 3 times a week, and we pretend this conversation never happened." He set the card on the coffee table between them. "But I think you're smart enough to know that opportunities like this don't come around often." Brielle stared at the card, heavy cream stock with embossed lettering. "Rocco Martelli, President, Martelli Enterprises." "Why me?" she asked. You could hire anyone, someone with a proper degree, proper credentials. Because you're not just fluent in languages, you understand accents, dialects, nuances. Because you've survived in a city that tried to break you, which tells me you're resilient. Because when my associates disrespected you, you didn't cower. He tilted his head slightly. And because I trust my instincts about people, Brielle. And my instincts say you're someone worth investing in. Her hand trembled as she reached for the card. The moment her fingers touched it, she felt the weight of the decision. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a door opening to a world she'd never imagined entering. I need to think about it, she said. You have until tomorrow. Rocco stood, signaling the conversation was over. My driver will take you home. It's late. I can take the bus. My driver, he repeated, in a tone that said the discussion was closed. Brielle, if you work for me, you'll learn that I take care of what's mine. Consider this a preview. What's mine? The word sent a strange flutter through her chest that she refused to analyze. That night, as Rocco's driver pulled up outside her modest apartment building on the south side, Brielle saw the curtains twitch in Mrs. Chen's window. She'd have questions tomorrow, but right now, all Brielle could think about was the card burning a hole in her pocket and the dangerous grey eyes that had seen past her uniform to the woman beneath. She found Amara asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch, thumb in mouth, her small body curled around a stuffed rabbit. As Brielle carried her daughter upstairs, Amara's eyes fluttered open. Mama. Shh, baby, I've got you. Did you have a good day at work? Brielle thought about the humiliation, the laughter, the cold fury in Rocco's eyes as he'd defended her, the impossible job offer that could change everything. Yeah, baby, she whispered, kissing Amara's forehead. I think I did. The next morning, Brielle called the number on the card. Her hand shook as she held the phone to her ear, listening to it ring once, twice. Martelli. His voice was brisk, professional. It's Brielle Washington. I accept your offer. There was a pause, then, good. Be at my office at 9. We have a lot of work to do. The call ended before she could respond. Brielle stared at her phone, her heart racing. She'd just agreed to work for the Chicago Mafia. If her grandmother back in Trinidad could see her now, she'd probably have a heart attack. But then Brielle looked at Amara, eating cereal at their wobbly kitchen table, wearing pajamas that were getting too small. She thought about the stack of bills on the counter, the eviction notice she'd managed to stall, the future she desperately wanted to give her daughter. Sometimes survival meant making dangerous choices. She just hoped this one wouldn't destroy her. Brielle's first day at Martelli Enterprises started with a lie. The office manager, a severe woman named Patricia, handed Brielle a stack of employment forms. Position executive assistant to Mr. Martelli. You'll be handling his international correspondence, scheduling meetings, hand-translating documents as needed. On paper it looked legitimate, almost respectable, but Brielle knew better. She'd spent the past 3 days researching Rocco Martelli, and the picture that emerged was clear. Shipping companies that moved more than cargo, restaurants that laundered more than tablecloths, real estate holdings that served as fronts for operations she didn't want to understand. And now she was part of it. Her office was small but elegant, glass walls overlooking the Chicago skyline, a mahogany desk with a computer that looked like it cost more than her car. Fresh flowers sat in a crystal vase, and a note in sharp, masculine handwriting read, Welcome. R.M. Mr. Martelli wants to see you when you're settled, Patricia said, her tone suggesting that settled should take approximately 30 seconds. Brielle found Rocco in his private office, standing by the window with a phone pressed to his ear. He gestured for her to sit, finishing his conversation in rapid Italian. She caught enough to know it was about money, lots of it, and someone named Carlo who'd apparently disappointed him. When he hung up, he turned to face her, and Brielle's breath caught despite herself. In his office, surrounded by the trappings of power, Rocco Martelli was even more intimidating than he'd been in the penthouse. The tailored charcoal suit emphasized his broad shoulders, and the way he moved, controlled, precise, reminded her of a predator assessing prey. You came, he said simply. You offered me 5 times my salary. Of course I came. That almost smile touched his lips again. Practical. I like that. He slid a folder across his desk. These are correspondence files from our operations in Rome, São Paulo, and Port of Spain. I need translations by end of day, and I need to know if there are any irregularities. Brielle opened the folder, scanning the documents. Business contracts, shipping manifests, financial transfers, all perfectly legitimate on the surface. But she'd learned to read between lines, to see what wasn't being said. What kind of irregularities? She asked carefully. Anything that suggests someone is trying to deceive me. Rocco's eyes were hard. Lies, Brielle. I need you to find the lies. Over the next weeks, Brielle discovered she had a talent for finding lies. Her language skills went beyond mere translation. She could detect subtle shifts in tone, regional dialects that didn't match stated origins, coded phrases that revealed hidden meanings. She also discovered that working for Rocco Martelli meant existing in two worlds simultaneously. By day, she was a professional executive assistant, scheduling conference calls and translating contracts. By night, she went home to Amara, read bedtime stories, and pretended her life was normal. But the lines were blurring. "Mama, why does that man always drive you to work?" Amara asked one morning as Rocco's driver waited outside their building. "It's a perk of my job, baby." "Is your boss nice?" Brielle thought about Rocco, the way his eyes softened slightly when he asked about Amara, the coffee that appeared on her desk each morning exactly how she liked it, the time he'd quietly paid her rent when he'd overheard her on the phone with her landlord. But she also thought about the conversation she'd accidentally overheard last week. Rocco's voice, cold and final. "I don't care if he's begging. He stole from us. Make an example." "He's complicated," Brielle finally answered. The truth was that Rocco Martelli terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. He was brutal with his enemies and unexpectedly gentle with her. He could switch from discussing shipment routes to asking about Amara's preschool performance in the span of a sentence, and the way he looked at her was starting to keep her awake at night. It happened on a Friday evening. Brielle was working late, finishing translations for a meeting Rocco had the next morning in Milan. Most of the office had cleared out, leaving just the two of them and the night security team. She brought the completed files to his office and found him at his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to reveal the intricate tattoos that covered his forearms. He looked exhausted in a way she'd never seen, vulnerable almost. "The translations are done," she said softly. "Do you need anything else before I go?" Rocco looked up, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Come here." She approached his desk, hyper-aware of how quiet the office was, how alone they were. "You've been working for me for 6 weeks now," he said, "and in that time, you've proven yourself invaluable. You found the discrepancy in the São Paulo contracts that would have cost us millions. You identified the courier in Rome who was working for Volkov. You've made my life considerably easier. Thank you, Mr. Martelli." "Rocco." His voice was quiet but firm. "When we're alone, you can call me Rocco. That doesn't seem appropriate." "A lot of things about our situation aren't appropriate, Brielle." He stood, moving around the desk until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne. "You work for a criminal. You help me run an organization that operates outside the law. You're smart enough to know what happens in those warehouses you schedule shipments for." Brielle lifted her chin. "I'm also smart enough to know that you've never lied to me, never pretended to be something you're not, and that you treat me with more respect than most legitimate employers ever did. Is that why you stay, Respect? I stay because you gave me a chance when no one else would, because my daughter eats 3 meals a day now instead of 1, because for the first time in my life I'm not drowning." She paused. "And because, despite everything you are, you've never made me feel afraid." Rocco's eyes darkened. "You should be afraid of me, Brielle." "Why? Because you're dangerous. Because of the way I think about you." The confession came out rough, honest. "Because every time you walk into my office, I have to remind myself that you work for me, that you're under my protection, that I have no right to—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Brielle's heart hammered against her ribs. "No right to what? To want you the way I do." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Brielle knew she should step back, maintain professional distance. This was her boss, A Mafia don. A man who could destroy her with a word. But she'd spent 9 years in America being careful, being safe, being invisible. And for once, she wanted to be reckless. "What if I want you too?" Rocco's eyes went molten. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it." The words came out steadier than she felt. "I know what you are. I know the risks, and I still—" He kissed her before she could finish the sentence. His hands cupped her face with surprising gentleness, and his lips claimed hers with a hunger that stole her breath. Brielle melted into him, her fingers gripping his shirt, her body responding to his touch with an intensity that shocked her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rocco rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "I know. If we do this, I need you to understand something." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "I'm possessive. I'm jealous, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. If you become mine, Brielle, there's no going back." "I've never had anyone protect me before," she admitted. "I've always been the one doing the protecting." "Not anymore." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "You and Amara, you're under my protection now. Anyone who tries to hurt you answers to me." It should have felt suffocating. Instead, for the first time in years, Brielle felt like she could breathe. Their kiss deepened, and Brielle lost herself in the sensation of being wanted, being claimed, being chosen. Rocco's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and she could feel the controlled strength in his body, the barely restrained desire. Then his phone rang. Rocco cursed in Italian, something creative and violent. He answered with a snarl. "This better be important." Brielle watched as his expression went from irritated to deadly serious. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause, and his eyes went flat and cold. "I'm on my way." He hung up and looked at Brielle with regret. "I have to go. There's a situation at one of the warehouses." "Is it dangerous?" "It's always dangerous." He grabbed his jacket, then turned back to her. "My driver will take you home. And Brielle, don't answer your door for anyone tonight. If something seems wrong, you call me immediately." Fear flickered through her. "Rocco, what's happening?" "Dmitry Volkov is making a move. He hit one of our shipments." Rocco's jaw was tight. "I need to send a message that we don't tolerate theft. Be careful." He kissed her one more time, hard and possessive. "Always." Then he was gone, leaving Brielle alone in his office with her lipstick smeared and her world tilted on its axis. She touched her lips, still feeling the heat of his kiss, and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. The answer came sooner than she expected. Brielle didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small living room, lights off, watching the street below. Rocco's driver had insisted on parking outside her building, which should have been comforting but only amplified her anxiety. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He's fine. Situation handled. R.M." She exhaled in relief, but sleep still didn't come. Because now she understood what being with Rocco Martelli really meant. Every night he walked into danger, every business decision could be his last. And if she loved him, and she was beginning to suspect she might, she'd spend the rest of her life waiting for the call that said he wasn't coming home. Morning came with another text. "My office, 10 a.m., we need to talk." Brielle dropped Amara at preschool, her daughter chattering happily about the upcoming field trip to the aquarium. The normalcy of it felt surreal against the backdrop of whatever had happened last night in that warehouse. Rocco was waiting in his office, and Brielle's breath caught at the sight of him. A bruise darkened his left cheekbone, and his knuckles were wrapped in white bandages. But his eyes burned with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Close the door," he said. She did, and before she could ask if he was okay, he was crossing the room and pulling her into his arms. The kiss was desperate, claiming, a man reassuring himself that something precious was still safe. "I'm all right," she gasped when he finally let her breathe. "Rocco, I'm fine." "I know. I had someone watching your building all night." He cupped her face, studying her as if memorizing every detail. "But I needed to see you. Needed to. I was worried about you too." Something softened in his expression. "No one worries about me, Brielle. They fear me, respect me, sometimes hate me. But worry? That's new. Get used to it. She touched the bruise on his cheek gently. What happened? Volkov's men ambushed our shipment. They were waiting. His voice went cold. Which means someone on the inside told them when and where. You have a traitor. Had. Past tense. Rocco's tone made it clear she didn't want details. But this is what I needed to talk to you about. Volkov knows about you now. He knows you work for me, which makes you a target. Fear coiled in Brielle's stomach. And Amara? Already protected. I have a team watching her preschool. But we need to move you both somewhere safer. Move us? Rocco, I can't just uproot my daughter. Listen to me. His hands gripped her shoulders, urgent. Dmitry Volkov doesn't play by rules. He doesn't have lines he won't cross. If he thinks hurting you or your daughter will get to me, he won't hesitate. So what are you saying, that we become prisoners? I'm saying you move into my penthouse where I can protect you properly, where there's security, cameras, armed guards. He saw her expression and softened his approach. Brielle, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you alive. She pulled away, pacing to the window. The city spread out below, dangerous, indifferent, full of predators in human skin. She'd survived it alone for 9 years by being invisible, but now she was visible. Now she mattered to someone powerful, which painted a target on her back. What about Amara's school? Her routine? She's just starting to make friends. Private tutors can come to the penthouse, or I can arrange for armored transport to and from her preschool with a full security detail. Rocco moved behind her, his presence a solid warmth at her back. I know this isn't the life you chose, but you chose me, and this is part of what that means. Brielle closed her eyes. I need to think about it. You have until end of day. After that, I'm making the decision for you. Before she could argue, he turned her to face him. I won't apologize for being protective, Brielle. Not when it comes to you and your daughter. You're mine now. That means I'll burn down the city before I let anyone hurt you. The possessiveness should have terrified her. Instead, it kindled something primal in her chest. No one had ever wanted to protect her before. She'd always been the protector, the survivor, the one who had to be strong. Okay, she whispered. We'll move to the penthouse, but Rocco, I need something from you in return. Anything. Honesty. No more secrets about the danger. If something's happening, if there's a threat, you tell me. I won't be kept in the dark like a child. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Deal. But that goes both ways. You tell me everything, Brielle, where you go, who you talk to. I need to know you're safe. That's a lot of trust you're asking for. Trust is earned. I'll prove I'm worthy of yours if you prove you're worthy of mine. They shook hands like sealing a business deal, which made Brielle want to laugh. Nothing about their relationship was businesslike. It was messy and dangerous and probably insane, but it was also the most real thing she'd felt in years. Moving happened fast. By that evening, Rocco's team had transferred Brielle and Amara's belongings to the penthouse. Her daughter's eyes went wide as she took in the massive space. Mama, is this a hotel? No, baby, this is where we're going to live for a while. Why? Because your mother fell for a Mafia boss who has enemies that would use us to hurt him. Because the world is dangerous and complicated, and I'm trying to keep you safe. But Brielle just said, because Mama's job is here, and it's easier this way. Rocco appeared in the doorway, and Amara hid behind Brielle's legs, shy around this tall, intimidating stranger. He crouched down to her level, which surprised Brielle. You must be Amara. Your mama has told me a lot about you. Amara peeked out. Are you Mama's boss? I am. Is that okay with you? You're not mean to her, are you? Rocco's lips twitched. No. I try very hard to be nice to your mama. Okay then. Amara seemed to make a decision. Do you have a TV? Mama said we can watch a movie tonight because it's Friday. I have several, and I think there might be some ice cream in the freezer if your mama says it's okay. Amara looked up at Brielle with pleading eyes, and she found herself nodding, charmed despite herself by the way Rocco was trying to win over her daughter. That night, after Amara was asleep in her new room, which Rocco had somehow decorated with Disney princesses in the space of a few hours, Brielle found him on the balcony overlooking the city. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything you did for Amara today. She's important to you. That makes her important to me. He pulled Brielle against his side, and she let herself lean into his warmth. But there's something you should know. Brielle tensed. What? Volkov isn't going to stop. Tonight was just the opening move. He's going to escalate, push until I'm forced to respond, and when I do, Rocco's jaw tightened. Things are going to get ugly. How ugly? War ugly. Full-scale conflict between families ugly. He looked down at her. I need to know you can handle that. Because once this starts, there's no stopping until one of us is dead. Brielle thought about her daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, about the life she'd built from nothing, the survival instincts that had carried her across an ocean and through 9 years of grinding poverty. I'm from Trinidad, Rocco. I grew up during the crime surge in the 90s. I've seen violence. I've survived things that would break most people. She turned to face him fully. What I need to know is if you're going to treat me like fragile china or like a partner. What do you want? I want to be useful. I want to help. I can translate. I can coordinate. I can be your eyes and ears in communities your men can't access. She gripped his shirt. Don't lock me away to keep me safe. Let me be strong with you. Rocco stared at her for a long moment, something like awe in his eyes. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and claiming. You're extraordinary, he murmured against her lips. You know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. No, you're extraordinary, and you're mine. His hands tightened on her waist. Say it. I'm yours. Again. I'm yours. Rocco Martelli. The words felt like a vow, a promise, a point of no return. And when he led her to his bedroom, when he made love to her with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his brutal reputation, Brielle knew she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She'd fallen in love with a monster. And the truly terrifying part? She didn't want to take it back. The war started 3 days later. Brielle was working in her office when the explosion rocked the building. The windows rattled, and somewhere below, alarms began shrieking. She was on her feet instantly, running toward Rocco's office. He was already barking orders into his phone, his face a mask of cold fury. When he saw her, relief flashed in his eyes before the ice returned. Volkov hit the restaurant on 5th, he said curtly. No casualties, thank God, but it's a message. He's coming for everything I own. What do we do? We? Rocco's eyebrow rose. You said I was your partner, so what do we do? He studied her for a moment, then made a decision. We hit him back. Harder. Tonight. The next hours were a blur of preparation. Brielle coordinated communications between Rocco's various operations, translating urgent messages from allies in Italy and Brazil. She watched as the man she loved transformed into the ruthless Don that made grown men tremble. But when he looked at her, the ice melted slightly. You should take Amara and go underground. I can have you both on a plane to... No. Brielle's voice was firm. We're staying, but I want Amara moved to a safe house with round-the-clock protection. Already done, my most trusted men are with her. He pulled Brielle close. If anything happens to me tonight, don't. Listen to me. His hands framed her face. If something happens, you take Amara and run. There's an account in her name. Enough money to start over anywhere in the world. The codes are in my desk, bottom drawer behind the false panel. Brielle's eyes burned. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that. I know that you're too stubborn to die. And I know that you promised to protect us, which means you have to come back. She kissed him hard. So you will. That night, Brielle waited in the penthouse, every muscle tense. She'd sent Amara to the safe house hours ago, her daughter confused but trusting. Now she sat alone in the darkness, listening to sirens in the distance, wondering if everyone meant Rocco was hurt or worse. Her phone rang at 2 a.m. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Brielle Washington? A man's voice accented, Russian. Every instinct screamed danger. Who is this? A friend of Dmitry Volkov. He wanted me to tell you that your boss made a mistake tonight. A very costly mistake. Brielle's blood ran cold. Where's Rocco? Safe, for now. But Mr. Volkov thought you should know. He found the safe house where you're keeping your daughter. The world stopped. Everything narrowed to that single sentence, that impossible threat. "You're lying." "Am I? Pretty little thing, 4 years old, wearing pink pajamas with butterflies. She was sleeping when we—" Brielle hung up and immediately called Rocco. No answer. She called the safe house. No answer. She called the head of security. No answer. Panic clawed at her throat. This couldn't be happening. Rocco had promised. He'd promised Amara would be safe. She was reaching for her coat, preparing to run into the night, when the penthouse door slammed open. Rocco stood there, covered in soot and blood, but alive, and cradled in his arms, sleeping peacefully, was Amara. Brielle's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, sobs tearing from her chest as relief and terror warred for dominance. Rocco handed Amara to one of his men, someone Brielle recognized as Marco, his most trusted enforcer. "Take her to the secure bedroom. Don't leave her side." Then he was on the floor with Brielle, pulling her into his arms as she shook apart. "They called me," she gasped. "They said they had her. They said—" "Psychological warfare. Volkov wanted to break you." Rocco's voice was granite. The safe house was never compromised. Amara was never in danger. But he knew where to strike to hurt you most. "How did you know?" "Because I would have done the same thing." His arms tightened around her. "I'm sorry, Brielle. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." She pulled back to look at him, really look at him. The blood wasn't his. She could tell from the splatter patterns, but his eyes held a darkness she'd never seen before. "What did you do?" she whispered. "What I had to." Rocco stood, pulling her up with him. "Volkov crossed a line tonight. He threatened a child. My child, as far as I'm concerned. So I sent a message of my own." "Rocco?" "3 of his warehouses are burning as we speak. His second-in-command won't be giving orders anymore. And I made it very clear that if he ever speaks your name or Amara's name again, I'll dismantle his entire organization brick by brick." His jaw was set. "The war is over, Brielle. He surrendered an hour ago." "It's really over?" "It's over." He cupped her face gently, the violence in his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You're safe. Amara's safe, and I swear on everything I am, I will never let anyone threaten either of you again." Brielle should have been horrified, should have been afraid of what he'd done, what he was capable of, but all she felt was safe, protected, cherished. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's insane, and probably stupid, and definitely dangerous, but I love you, Rocco Martelli." His eyes widened, genuine surprise that someone could love a man like him. Then something broke open in his expression, something vulnerable and raw. "I love you too, eh?" he said roughly. "From the moment you stood up to my associates instead of cowering, from the moment you looked at me and saw a man instead of a monster, you and Amara, you're my family now, the only family that matters." He kissed her then, desperate and claiming and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, Brielle rested her forehead against his. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now? Now we build a life together. A real one." Rocco's thumb brushed across her cheek. "Marry me, Brielle." "What?" "Marry me. Be my wife. Let me give you and Amara everything you deserve. Safety, security, a future without fear." He pulled back to look into her eyes. "I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Brielle thought about the girl who'd left Trinidad at 17, with nothing but dreams and desperation. The woman who'd scrubbed floors and counted pennies and survived on sheer stubborn will. The mother who'd done anything and everything to give her daughter a chance. And now here was a man offering her the world. A dangerous, complicated, morally grey man who somehow made her feel more alive than she'd ever been. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Rocco's smile was brilliant, transforming his face from intimidating to devastatingly beautiful. He kissed her again, and in that moment Brielle knew she'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the easy choice, but the right one. 3 years later, Brielle stood on the balcony of their new home, a sprawling estate outside Chicago with gardens and security and rooms for the family they'd built together. Amara, now 7, ran through the grass with her little brother, 2-year-old Alessandro, chasing after her with toddler determination. Rocco came up behind Brielle, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "About how far we've come, how different my life is now." She leaned back into him. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." "Believe it, Mrs. Martelli." He kissed her neck. "You're stuck with me. Lucky me." But she smiled as she said it. Their life wasn't perfect. Rocco still ran his organization, still dealt with threats and rivals, and the constant danger that came with power. But he'd also gone legitimate in many of his operations, building an empire that could eventually be passed down to his children without shame. And Brielle had found her place in his world. She ran the international division of Martelli Enterprises, her language skills and cultural knowledge making her invaluable. She'd also started a foundation to help immigrant women find legitimate work, paying forward the chance she'd been given. "Mama! Mama! Watch me!" Amara called from the garden, attempting a cartwheel. "I see you, baby," Brielle called back. "That was beautiful." Rocco chuckled. "She's going to be trouble when she's older." "She already is. She gets it from her father." "I'm not her biological father." "No." Brielle turned in his arms to face him. "But you're her father in every way that matters. You chose her. You chose us. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Brielle. Today, tomorrow, always." "I love you too." As they stood together watching their children play, the Chicago skyline glittering in the distance, Brielle marveled at the journey that had brought her here, from a mocked cleaning woman to the wife of a powerful man, from survival to thriving, from hiding to being seen. It had started with one question from a man who saw past her accent to the woman beneath. One moment of recognition that had changed everything, and she wouldn't change a single second of it. This story has come to an end. If it touched your heart in any way, leave your like and share it with someone who also enjoys emotional stories. New stories are coming soon. Until next time.